The Change My View podcast is the work of the reddit.com/r/changemyview moderation team. I'm Michael Hatch, username mehatch, your host today for this, the 8th episode of our podcast. Today we'll be featuring the number one upvoted discussion on Change My View of the past 12 months. Over 6,000 upvotes now that it's all settled in. And it was posted by username the Evil Sidekick, who we are lucky enough to have interviewed today to share his story from Paris, France, about his experience posting that, how it got huge, and his discussions, and how he changed his minds on a couple of things. So, listen in, enjoy, and just see an example of really what we are aiming for in Change My View, what we're proud of in Change My View, is a discussion where you do have a lot of a polite discussion, a good talk, an OP who finds some new perspective on things. He even gives away a couple deltas, so we'll talk about how those came to pass as well, and what changed his mind. So, go ahead and hop on in then. Episode 8, Change My View, Religion and Childhood. Thanks for listening. Today's date is May 30th, 2017, and it's 12:10 p.m. Pacific local time. And what time zone are you in, Evil?
I'm in Paris time. I think it's 1 hour after GMT.
Paris time GMT +1 is where username the Evil Sidekick is here. And you're right if I call you Evil?
Oh, that's fine.
In the last month, the highest rated post on Change My View was your post. And so I thought we might begin just by reading the intro and then the post itself just in your voice. You're right with that?
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Great. Okay, well then just whenever you're ready.
Change my view. Just like sex education, religion should be introduced to children only after they've reached a certain age and level of maturity. Let me be clear. I know this cannot be imposed in any form by a government or a law. I'm proposing this simply as a guideline for current and future parents. My arguments are as follows. Children in their early formative years are incapable of rational, informed thought. Their entire universe is structured around what their parents tell them. If you tell them that the earth is the shape of an upside down ice cream cone and that the sun is at the tip of it, they will believe you. Not just believe you, this will become their truth. As an adult, your religious beliefs directly influence the life you lead. It will influence the decisions you make in terms of the life partner you choose, the company you keep, the vote you cast, and the path you take in life. It should not affect these things in an ideal world, but we do not live in such an ideal world. Considering the vast impact that your religious beliefs have, it seems very unfair to have one particular strict, unflinching dogma drilled into you during your formative years as a kid. Religion should be a choice, just like your hobbies, your friends, and your career. You may argue that many of us were raised this way and we eventually, quote unquote, grew out of it, or changed our views once we reached maturity and broadened our horizons, but that's not a valid argument in my book. For every story of a person who has changed or given up religion, there is another story of someone whose upbringing was extremely strict and orthodox and it continues to define them as an adult, with or without their knowing consent. This particular point may be directed towards a very small section of the parent population, but I'm going to make it anyways. Some parents use religion as a crutch to assist them in raising their children. By this, I mean that God is the perfect, scary, all-powerful, metaphorical carrot and stick for your kids. Teach your kids not to steal because it's the wrong thing to do, not because God is watching. Teach your kids to help the poor because it's the right thing to do, not because it'll help them get into heaven. I don't want to tell parents how to raise their kids, but I'm drawing from my own personal upbringing. The gist of my argument is this. Religion is a beautiful thing if understood and practiced as it is meant to be. If not, it can turn ugly and cause misery to oneself and others. Therefore, it should be introduced to children carefully and only once they're mature enough to grasp its meaning and purpose.
and that's the post.
Okay, and there's your summary right there, your TLDR, as it were. Yeah, so to begin with, have you had a lot of history with ChangeMyView before this?
I have lurked on it before. I don't know if I've made a couple of comments or not, but yeah, I've lurked. I've definitely read through some of the things, the top ones, but that's about it.
Okay, so this is sort of a really your first time diving in completely, and you went from 0 to 6,000 upvotes pretty quickly.
Yeah, it was a surprise for me for sure. I didn't think it'd take off that big.
Yeah. So without getting into much of the detail of the post just yet, any other sort of background with you on Reddit or how you came to find ChangeMyView?
I believe my first introduction to the subreddit was that other famous post. The one the previous podcast was about, the whole surveillance and the government should be allowed to read your emails. That one.
Yeah, the 15 gilded
Yeah.
post by 15, 16, 17, 19
Right.
count. Now,
That was the first
check out
time.
episode 7 for those listening who want to hear more about that, and we'll add that note in the show notes. So from reading that, then did that sort of just get your attention and you started lurking more then in the sub?
Yeah. That was the first time I realized the sub exists, and it's sort of like a friends discussion group, but online.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was interesting to come back and lurk once in a while and look at the top posts.
Right on. Cool. So then now, before you had posted on that particular day, was there anything that had happened in your world? And again, I know you want to stay anonymous and all that, but generally speaking, that might have been informed your desire to go ahead and post this. We find that oftentimes the events of someone's day or week might lead to a post. The example, I've turned to from time to time is someone might see someone double parked and then get frustrated by that, couldn't find a parking spot, and 6 hours later they're on ChangeMyView saying a double parking should be punished by 10 years in prison. ChangeMyView, because it's coming right out of their day. They're still pissed about it. So it doesn't necessarily have to be that simple. But was there anything going on with you at the time that led to you wanting to post this about religion and parents?
It wasn't anything that day or that week in particular, but I'm just in a stage in my life where most of my friends are either getting married or having kids. And I know I'm going to be there in a couple of years or so. So this is something that I've had discussions with my friends about, just in terms of you see all the things that's going on in the world now, and they're all sort of either directly or indirectly related to religion, or can have influences from religion. So we were just discussing, is there anything that our generation needs to do different or needs to do better to sort of improve what's going on or change what's going on? Right. And so that's sort of, it was just in my head. There was nothing that happened particularly on that day or anything like that.
All right. Well, and would you say and if you don't mind me asking, what religious point of view do you come from personally, if any, spiritual view, whatever? How would you define yourself and that big blurry category?
My parents were both Hindus.
Uh-huh.
So I was raised primarily in a Hindu household, mm-hmm. And my entire school, everybody I knew, like 90% of the people I knew before I moved out, so I would say that is primarily my background. Although now I'm not religious. I don't follow any religion myself.
Okay, so you go atheist or agnostic or somewhere in there?
Yeah, somewhat there. I really don't know. Agnostic would be closer, I guess.
So let's take a closer look at the post as it developed. So you first posted this, right? Was there any changes in any major way as far as edits or anything? Or did it pretty much stay as it was?
No, there was no edits on this, I think. It stayed. I laid out my points as they were. I do a lot of editing before I post because I'm sort of like a paranoid person when it comes to grammar and things like that. So there was no edits.
Sure, yeah. Well, let's look at then going in here, this first response that you gave your first delta to about. That's all right?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so here's the post that led to the first delta you gave, and I will read the response now as the alternate voice here. And this response was from On My Lunch Break. who has earned 17 deltas to date on ChangeMyView, user on _my_lunch_break. And here's what they wrote back in response to your post. On my lunch break says, I agree in general, but I think there's something vital that you're missing. Religious people believe in their religion, full stop. They believe that they know the truth. It's not dogma, it's not choice. It has nothing to do with rationality. It's just the truth, in caps, truth, for those people, capital letter for T. There are lots of things we mostly agree to be true in our culture that aren't agreed upon in other cultures, and they are legitimate scientific facts that some people will dispute the veracity of. So where do you draw the line? It's not okay for someone to teach their religion, which they believe to be true to their kids. And this is crossed out, but I'll read it aloud for reference later. And they say, crossed out, how is it okay for me to teach my child the earth is round when the flat earth folks would disagree with that, ? Now back to uncrossed out part. Their better improved version of the question is, how is it okay for me to teach my child that X, Y, and Z is wrong when there are certainly people out there who disagree? That's all in bold. Their final edit to their response to this, I'm getting a lot of responses that, by the way, before I read the edit, did you give the delta before or after the edit?
Before.
Before, okay, so then let's stop there and we'll skip the edit part for now. Just focus on this, because that's what convinced you to give the delta. So now, what are your thoughts initially hearing that again now? And walk our viewers through really what you were feeling at the time, what changed in your mind, and then finally how you're looking at it again, maybe with fresh eyes a month or so later now.
I don't know if I misused the delta system, but the reason I gave the delta was he was the only person who sort of made me understand the opposite side. I didn't necessarily change my view, right? I just understood what someone on the other side of the fence would be thinking, which is that to me, religion is like a fable that somebody tells somebody else. That's it's really a story. But to somebody who is actually deeply religious, it's really no different than telling your kid that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. It's really no different than that. So to them, there really is no difference between teaching your kid just about anything in daily life and teaching your kid about religion. There is no difference, as there is to me, somebody who's not religious. So this was the first comment. There are many that touch upon. This was the first comment where I realized that something that sounds like a belief system to me is like the absolute truth to somebody else. So how will that person know that whether he should or should not teach his kid? It's just like any other thing, like how to tie your shoelaces, put on sunscreen when you go out in the sun. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, I think what you're saying is that what the person replying to you was basically bringing up is that who are we to decide for some other family what facts or other lessons to teach are appropriate for someone else? Like on a spectrum, you know, we can't force everyone to match everyone else's preferences on everything, or else nothing would happen anywhere, right? So is that kind of
right?
What you take that as meaning?
Yeah, for the religious person, it is the truth. So he's doing his duty as a parent and just teaching his kid what parents are supposed to teach their kids. So he's not really at fault for teaching his kid about religion. But I expand more about this in other replies, but there's certainly things that even a person who truly believes his religion to be the truth, there still are things that they can do that's different from what they probably are doing right now. But the main reason I just gave the delta was this was the first post among the replies I had gotten so far at that point of time, where I was like, oh yeah, he's not gonna know that it's like a belief system. To him, it's the truth. So that sort of makes sense when he teaches his kid about what he believes to be the truth.
And so looking at that, then it sounds to me like that's a legitimate delta. You're basically saying that the way you used the word, you kind of might have gone back and done it differently. And a word like belief can be a big one for that. So
yeah, I probably should have worded that different because it didn't change my view. It just made me realize what the opposite view was.
Yeah. Well, and in a place like ChangeMyView, sometimes things like those definitions, just like a word like belief, it's one of those big ones like faith or liberal that has many different interpretations. I think it really is one of the features of Change My View that those clarifications happen. So I think this is an example of a great Change My View moment. This is good. This is the good stuff.
And
So
I
never was
got a
an
lot of
shattering revelation for you. It was more of like a, this shows the conversation can still happen.
Exactly, yeah. And I got
so
a lot of messages on that delta from people saying that doesn't make sense. So what if the guy believes in something, it's not true, despite the fact that he believes in it? I can see that too.
Yeah. Well, because there's probably some degree to which you would still be like, "Oh, that's no good," like flat Earth or something like that, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I still don't buy it, but I kind of understand it.
Now, do you think there's anything in this realm where it gets complicated as far as something like age-appropriate things in America, something like Santa Claus or the Easter Bunny? I don't know how familiar you are with those traditions.
Oh yeah, I mean, I know about them. I've seen.
Yeah. So do you think these are the kind of things that, with that sliding scale of good and bad, might become more important as they get older, but the line between fantasy and reality perhaps might not be so bad if it were blurry at a younger age? Or do you think it's good to maybe teach that critical thinking early, first thing on? Or like, what are your thoughts on where that balance lives?
That's a good question, and that was brought up later in the thread by, if I'm not wrong, by the same user on my lunch break, where he was
yeah,
Santa Claus is a pretty common fantasy that most parents sell to their kids, and how is that okay and not religion?
yeah.
And
Well, maybe I can try and skip over to that reply. Actually, let me see if I have the link handy.
I sent it on the Hangout thing.
Great. Okay. So, and there it is.
And I think on my lunch break got a bunch of deltas from other people for
okay, here we go.
this comment.
Great. Okay, so let me put this up then. All right, so here is one of the other higher rated comments, 16 upvotes, so it's probably in the top 15 or so comments, I'd guess. But we'll just move forward here. So this is a direct response to your OP?
No, this is somebody else asked something like, well, what if the whole family goes to church? Are you just going to leave your kid behind at home because you don't want to teach him?
Yeah.
And I replied to that saying, it's definitely not. It's not about that. I just want kids to understand the difference between something that's a fact and something that's a belief. Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
All right, great. Okay, so to give this a little context, then I'm going to read the other person's comment here.
Okay.
And so this is probably one of the top 3 or 4 responses to the OP's original post, OP's OP. And here's the response to your original post, Evil Sidekick. And this is from user Teredos2, Teredos 2, who says, the whole family goes to church. The whole family celebrates Easter, Christmas, and other religious events. Should they just leave their 5-year-old home and or exclude them from holidays?
That was a good counter argument. So I said, absolutely not. I'm not advocating that the family becomes a gray blank slate in front of the 5-year-old. But I believe that it is their responsibility and a very delicate task to teach their 5-year-old about religion as a belief system and not preach it like an unquestionable truth. And I give 2 scenarios. For example, scenario 1. This is a conversation between a daughter and a father. So scenario 1, Daddy, where does the sun go at night? Well, princess, the earth is like a giant beach ball and it's constantly spinning, and the sun stays in one place. So when the part of the beach ball that we stand on spins away from the sun, we can't see it anymore. That's why it seems like the sun is going away and it's nighttime. Okay, Daddy. Now scenario 2. Daddy, what happens when you die? Well, princess, you know that God has been watching you every day, right? So he knows if you've been a good girl or a bad girl your entire life. So if you've been a good girl and not told a lie, not stolen, and not done other bad things, God will take you up to heaven to live with him for all of eternity happily. Okay, Daddy. So that's scenario 2. do you think your 5-year-old has the mental maturity to understand that one of those scenarios was scientific fact and one of those scenarios was your personal religious belief?
Okay, so that was the end of your comment. And so at this point, then a different user, no longer Terravos2, but this user responds 174 points and upvotes. Karisleka, I think it's pronounced, replies, if it is your personal religious belief, then to you it is a fact. Genuine belief isn't thinking the story sounds nice. It's believing it to be actually true. When Daddy's explaining that, as far as he is concerned, it is every bit as true as his explanation of where the sun goes, you're looking at this as from the outside perspective. But if you believed in heaven at the same way that you believed in gravity, something you don't necessarily understand fully, but have been taught, have observed in a manner satisfactory to you, and consider superior to any alternatives you've been proposed, then it would be every bit as critical to teach your child how to go to heaven as it is to teach your child not to climb out a window and jump. Or in other words, if you truly believe there's an eternal divine consequence, then teaching those religious precepts are as or more important than even the basics of gravity or anything else imaginable, really, given those premises. Is that fair, do you think?
Yeah, this is again what we've already talked about. To a person who truly believes, it's no different than fact. So of course he's going to teach his kid. There's nothing you and I can do about it.
Okay, and then this gets down to what will be your comment where you give a delta. There we go. So go ahead and read that, please.
So then he replies to my post, and then I say, yes, exactly. I like the way you worded that. I'll give you a delta 2. You're sort of backing up what a user on my lunch break said in his post. So this delta was, again, just sort of highlighting the earlier delta I gave because he worded it in a slightly better way.
Great. Okay, so that does go back to kind of the theme of the other posts. And these are the only 2 deltas, I believe, right?
These are the only 2 deltas, but
which is 2 more
if you scroll down, if you scroll down on, instead of Karisika's reply, there's another reply by on your lunch break. So he gets a bunch of deltas for that, where he brings up Santa Claus. I mean, not by me, but just by others.
Oh yeah. No, that's I'm glad you pointed that out. That's let me Control F for lunch.
Yeah, there you go. So
okay, so
do you see the comment that
I'll
starts?
go ahead and read on my lunch breaks post, and this is coming off the same thread, just further down within the same subthread.
Yep.
Okay. Yep. On my lunch break, this is the first responder that we talked about. The first other person we spoke from before who had the highest ranked post. But here's on my lunch breaks comment, which led to many deltas. 2 on my lunch break for that comment. On my lunch break says, I'm curious, how do you feel about Santa Claus? I've always thought it was a good way to introduce kids to the idea of myth, metaphor, critical thinking. But what's fundamentally different in your view between telling kids that Santa Claus will bring them presents on Christmas if they're good, and telling kids that God will take them to heaven when they die if they're good? Other than the fact that we eventually explain the Santa deception, is there a functional difference for kids' development? And the next response is from you.
So I had never honestly thought about Santa Claus as a parallel to God. So I reply, maybe this is purely because I don't have kids myself, and I'm terrified about what I'll tell them when I do have some. But I honestly never understood the Santa Claus thing. I wasn't raised in a Christian household, by the way. Why doesn't the dad just say, if you're good, I'll give you some presents on Christmas? Is it just an added fun gimmick to make Santa the proxy, or does he serve some other purpose?
So it looks like is that kind of where, well, actually, no, let's go further down because you guys have a few back and forths here. So on my lunch break replies to you and says, here, imagine you're a kid and you're thinking about doing some shitty things. Your parents said that if you're good, they'll give you presents, but they're not here right now, so they'll never know you're bad. So you can just do the bad thing and you'll still get presents. Basically, Santa, and arguably God too, is a proxy for conscience. This is still on my lunch break talking. It helps the kid to do the right thing. And if they have some external figure giving them guidance, even if that figure is imaginary, I think there's also a critical thinking aspect to it. At some point, they'll figure out that Santa isn't real, and that everything that contributed to their idea of Santa is a massive social contrivance. They'll learn that not everything that adults tell them is absolutely true, and that they'll need to critically examine new ideas. Ironically, I think a lot of atheist and agnostic folks who grew up in a religious households first start to question the idea of God when they find out that they have been lied to about Santa. So perhaps it's actually a pretty constructive conception when you think about it in that way. And the next comment's by you.
This comment sort of really made me pause and made me think. So I said, yup, I agree with everything you and user Neidhart said below. I honestly never thought of it like that. Man, now I'm even more confused about what approach to take with my future kid. Thanks for taking the time. That's sufficient food for thought.
So again, much more of the kind of conversation we always encourage on Change My View. And so for everyone listening, if this is the kind of thing you're interested in, this is what we hope you'll find more of, and we'll continue to find more of. And why good OPs like yourself, Evil Sidekick, can help contribute to that. So have you thought of any other? Actually, no. Before I skip to that, I did want to ask you about another point that came up a little bit earlier here. Just in general, in Reddit, there is and has been a very long, ongoing conversation that involves religion and atheism in some level, but it often centers around Western and Christian-centric points of view. And I'm wondering, having grown up in a Hindu background and from that perspective, are there any major kind of differences in how that dialogue might be more constructive or just more useful to someone from other cultures outside of that Western American Santa Claus Christian sort of constellation? Any thoughts on that, just from someone who didn't necessarily come from a Christian background, but another?
I think on the macro level, it's pretty much the same, because we're taught this. I mean, obviously, the mythos of Hindu mythology is different from other religions, and there's also the added I don't know, I want to say complexity of Hindu mythology having like many gods as opposed to just the monotheist religions which are common in the Western side. But I think it's pretty much the same. We are told stories as a kid, and as adults, some people come to the I don't want to say realization, because I don't know myself. Some people go down the path where they take these stories as just that. They're just stories. They're just fables that parents tell their kids to teach them some sort of morals. But the religious Hindu people, they believe that these things happened in the past, and so they revere the heroes of the stories, and they continue to worship them. So in a sense, there's not, it's the same as just any other religion, but there's added complexities because there's a lot of sub religions. Is that a word? Lot of sort of contradicting beliefs within Hinduism that sort of cause unnecessary strife, in my opinion, where where people argue that my story is true, your story is not, mine's what happened, yours is not, and it seems unnecessary to me. It seems counterproductive to me, but who am I to judge?
Great. Well, was there anything else since this has all gone down that occurred to you about this? Have you gotten any interested PMs that it led to any other interesting conversations, that sort of thing?
I haven't gotten any PMs, thankfully. Most of the discussion happened on the thread. But yeah, I mean, I've thought about this, and one sort of idea that wasn't really brought up on the thread was we mainly discussed when is it good to teach kids about religion on the thread, right? Because that was the premise of my post, was that you should teach religion to kids only once they're older and more mature. But there's another viewpoint of, if you're going to teach your kids about religion, don't just teach them about your religion, about the religion the parents follow or your family follows. Teach them about all religions, or rather, just major religions like around you. and you can definitely say, we follow this religion, we believe this religion, but there are these other sets of people who believe this religion, and that's different from us. And there's really no harm in teaching your kids about that. That doesn't undermine the religion you are sort of you're teaching to your kid, but it helps, because kids will go out, meet other kids in school, and instead of it being sort of an unfamiliar and strange contact when you meet somebody from who follows some other religion, if you've already been taught that at home, it'll be a more pleasant experience for the kid. He'll immediately relate to that other person. It'll seem familiar, and I think that might be another alternative that wasn't really discussed on the thread. Why just teach the one religion? Teach them all religions. That might be even better than not teaching them religion at all.
All right, cool. Well, one last thing I thought would be worth bringing up just in this context. I actually missed this thread at the time it happened, but just one thing I thought might be worth bringing up, just as another perspective on the same topic. What would occur to me in this is that is there an adaptive functional usefulness to a mythos? And I'm borrowing, I think, from Young and Campbell here a bit, but as serving three purposes of establishing, origin of the world, and second one is the origin of the world is like, how did all this come to be? A normative set of values on what we should do, and then a third one sort of guiding people to their place and purpose, which factors into traditions of initiation rites and all that. So despite the truth or non-truth of religion, do you think there's a legitimate argument to be made that despite that fact, we've evolved to be religious, and it's still healthier to have some kind of mythos or religious construct as its own benefit, whether or not it might end up being true or not in the end, as far as the whole big universe?
That's another interesting viewpoint. I think it was discussed on by some of the lower voted comments on the thread, where one of the arguments was, like you said, one of the pillar stones of religion is to provide answers to the unknown, right? Like these questions, like how did the universe begin? Why are we here? Things like that. And religion sort of aims to give you answers to these questions to which we don't know the answers. But at the end of the day, it's just a sort of a palatable, digestible answer to something. Okay, so the argument against that was, is it better to teach children that it's okay to say I don't know to something? Like if I ask you the question, how many planets in the universe are capable of sustaining life? Some would argue that the only acceptable answer to that question is I don't know. What religion does is it gives you an answer to that question that's easier to understand, that gives you more satisfaction, and builds on that. So it's really an argument of what is better for the kid. Is it comfort in a make-believe answer, or is it the cold hard truth of there are things that we don't know, and this should encourage them to expand their mind, critical thinking, think about these things, try to answer these things, and teach them that it's okay to not know something, not know the answer to something, versus a comforting answer as a kid, just like you do with the tooth fairy or the Easter bunny or any of these other things. They will eventually grow out of it and question it, but maybe it's better to just give them that comfort as a kid. And I honestly, I can't tell you which one is better as a parent to tell your kid. This terrifies me too, to think about what I will do eventually. But I think there's definitely merit in both schools of thought.
All right. Well, maybe that's a great note to end on then, with that final I don't know. Did you have any other thoughts, Ebal?
No, just thanks for having me on.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for dialing in here. I know it's 10 o'clock your time now. So thanks for staying up late all the way over there in Paris, France. And thank you for coming on the Change My View podcast.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. Please keep doing these. These are fun.
Thank you for listening to the Change My View podcast, the work of the reddit.com/r/ChangeMyView moderation team. And to find out more about this episode, a deeper dive on that info, go on over to Change My View and look for that sticky post on this episode. If you have missed the window and is far in the future and you have not listened to this while the sticky post is still up, that's all right. We will have past episodes available. Just go on into the subreddit and look in the sidebar on the right to the link to the podcast and more details there. You are our subreddit. It's you. So we want to hear from you. All your feedback, all your thoughts, good and bad. Same sidebar there on the right. You'll find the links to everything you need to find us and get our ear, our attention, because we're open to hearing it. Have a great day. See you next time. Not see you. You'll hear me next time and another person probably. But you get the idea. All right. Till then.